When people talk about mental health, we often hear the phrase, regulate your emotions. But what does that even mean? Hi, I'm Scarlett Classic, and welcome to Classic Advice, a mental health podcast offering guidance for resilient souls, anchoring calm amidst the chaos. But what does that actually mean, regulate your emotions? Because a lot of us hear that and we think that it means that we need to stop feeling the feelings. Like we need to stop feeling angry or anxious or sad or frustrated or overwhelmed, to like the hard emotions to deal with. That's how I used to take it until it was explained to me better. And that's not what it means at all. It does not mean stop yourself from feeling those feelings that you don't want to feel. That is a horrible thing to do. I did it for years. I stuffed down my emotions. I pushed them down. I put them in a bottle. I put the bottle on the shelf. I closed the door, locked it, threw away the key, and tried not to think of it again. And that is one of the worst things that you can do, is bottle up your emotions or push them down so far and not feel, because they don't actually go anywhere. Regulating your emotions doesn't mean don't feel. We're supposed to feel anger, sadness, frustration, all of those. They have a purpose, and they're trying to tell us something. And to force yourself to not feel is not the healthy thing to do. And in the long run, it's going to come back and, bite you, as it did me years ago. And regulating your emotions means learning how to cope while you're feeling the feelings, while you're going through the emotions. Regulation isn't about controlling the feelings. It's about controlling what we do when and while we are having these emotions. Being human means experiencing emotions, and that's not just the happy ones. It means to be all of them. The entire spectrum, from anger, fear, anxiety, grief, sadness, frustration, disappointment, all the way onto the flip side of happiness and joy and contentment and excitement and all of those. The whole spectrum. Not just trying to only live in the happy and ignoring that the other side doesn't exist, because it does. These emotions, they're not evidence that there's something wrong with you or me. It's evidence that we're alive, that we're human. We are going to experience these things. So the goal shouldn't be to only live on one side of that spectrum. Learning how to regulate your emotions it's like having the goal be that you stop letting those emotions control you and drive your behavior, but you decide how you are going to react and how you are going to behave despite having all of these different emotions. So we can feel anger without the explosion, without, throwing something or yelling. We can have and feel the anxiety without avoiding going to the party. We can feel sadness without giving up. We can feel fear, but still move forward and still do the thing, whatever the thing is. Because emotions are not the problem. How we act, how we behave, what happens next after we feel those emotions, what we do with it and our behavior, that's where our growth really starts to shine. how we handle this and how we behave despite feeling all the feelings. Our reactions and our responses to all of these different emotions. I used to be someone that when I was going through a hard time, I would close myself off from my friends, and I wouldn't tell them what's going on because I didn't want to be a burden, and I didn't want to, make it seem like I'm having a pity party. So I just would keep to myself. But we don't have to tell the world our problems, but telling a close friend, hey, what's really going on, so that they can be there for you, so that you have someone to lean on. Not out of pity, but just for that emotional support that, I'm more than happy to do for my friends when they're going through a hard time. So why wouldn't, they want to do the same thing for me? But I have this thing where I don't want to be a burden to anybody, so I just close off. So that's just an example of how I'm learning to evolve and grow. And when I'm feeling this emotion of overwhelm or maybe fear or sadness on what's going on in my personal life, I don't just shut down and keep all of those feelings to myself. I open up to my friends and let them be there for me. Or what about when I feel anger? I used to stuff that one down hardcore because I didn't want to feel it. Now when I'm angry about something, I tell, my husband or someone really close to me, like, hey, I am really angry about this. And, my husband, he'll let me go on this big rant, let me get it out and express it in a safe environment where I'm not hurting anybody. My kid, I teach them to scream into their pillow. That's not hurting anybody, but it's getting it out. You're allowed to feel these things. But how controlling our reaction to how we're going to deal and cope when these emotions come up. And this is basically, the book that I'm trying to write is basically all about this, regulating and shifting into that logical frame of mind of how are we going to regulate? How are you going to deal? What are you going to do? How are you going to cope with this emotion that's come up? That response. Because I spent years just reacting and feeling very out of control whenever these emotions would come up, because if I didn't stuff them down, I reacted in a bad way, and then I felt bad about it, and then I had to deal with that, and it was just, I felt like a mess because I felt so out of control when it came to my own behaviors and my own actions. Something happens and then we feel something about it, and immediately, I acted on the feeling as opposed to stopping and thinking about it and shifting into that logical frame of mind, which I get is not it's not an easy thing to do, but pausing just for a minute and recognizing the fact, okay, this is what I'm feeling. What am I going to do about it? Because emotional regulation, it creates that small little space, that small pause between feeling and action. And in that pause, we get a choice on how we're going to behave and how we're going to react. And that tiny pause can make the world of difference, because we can recognize the fact that it's fine to have these feelings. It's fine to feel angry. You're angry about some injustice or whatever that has happened either to you or around you, and you're really upset about it. Or maybe you're anxious and feeling that anxiety about maybe seeing the person or going to the place, and your heart is racing. If you pause and be, okay, this is what is happening. How am I going to behave, and how am I going to react, and how do I want to behave, and who do I want to be and become? Because this isn't going to be an overnight. It's not going to be an overnight shift that you're just, a whiz at regulating your emotions. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of patience. But learning that the anxiety or anger or overwhelm can be there, but you can still regain that control. Because now you are deciding what is going to happen next and how you are going to react to the situation and how you are going to behave. I used to really get bad panic attacks. And sometimes they happened at work. It was horrible. But learning how to manage them, I would deep breathe and I would meditate at the same time. So as I breathed in, I would imagine calm coming into my body. And as I breathed out, I would imagine that panic or anger or whatever I was feeling in the moment go out with every exhale. And that might sound so silly to you, but it really did work for me. And what works for me might not work for you, so take that with a grain of salt, but it really did work. I chose how I was going to react to the situation. Instead of leaning into the panic and hyperventilating, I chose to slow my breathing down. Regulating and choosing how we're going to respond. And find what works for you. Maybe it's deep breathing and meditation. Maybe it's going for a walk or exercising or journaling or music or some other grounding exercise or talking to someone that you trust. But the goal is to find a healthy response and behavior on how you are going to behave after you feel the emotion. An experience. Get curious. Keep practicing. Try different things and try something for a few times before you just say, oh, this isn't for me. Give it a real good shot. Emotional regulation doesn't mean that you have to stop feeling. It just means stop letting the emotions control you and you taking back some of that control. Acknowledging the emotion, choosing your response, that's the skill. And it takes practice. But like a skill, the more you do it, the better that you're going to get. You can't always choose how you feel, but you can learn to choose what you do next. Thank you for tuning in to Classic Advice, guidance for resilient souls. May you stay anchored in what steadies you, rise resilient through what challenges you, and carry calm into whatever comes next. Take care. Love ya.